All right, guys. So today we have got metabolism again. This is actually going to be a relatively short lesson, even though it is one of our more technical lessons. You know, metabolism is always very, very technical. It's a lot of moving parts. You know, there are parts that you can't really hold or see, and so we got to kind of conceptualize them. But I think everybody in this call, everybody in here has been through our, physiology class, our metabolism class. So this actually should come pretty easily. It's a pretty gentle lesson today. So what we're going to be going over, we are going to talk about like what we mean when we say metabolism. We'll talk a lot about cellular respiration, like how our cells are bringing in oxygen and spitting out ATP. We'll talk about like metabolic rates and how that kind of works. Catabolism versus anabolism, how vitamins and minerals are going to help this happen. We'll talk a little bit about the nutritional guidelines that, again, make sure that you are maintaining your metabolism. We won't spend too much time talking about like disorders and their food allergies, things like that, or what happens as we get older, or body heat. I'll spend like 10 seconds on body heat, just because it's kind of fun. But we'll move past that honestly pretty quickly because that's not really our area too much. I mean, obviously we're actually in the youth mod here, so I do like to talk about it for just a minute or two, because one of the challenges of training youths is to help them maintain body heat and stuff. So looking at metabolism, right? We got a couple different types of metabolic activity. We've got catabolic reactions versus anabolic reactions. So if metabolism is everything, right? Metabolism is any and all chemical reactions that are taking place within the body. The components of that are the catabolic reactions, which are reactions that break down complex compounds into simpler ones, right? So for instance, like breaking carbohydrates into monosaccharides, right? That's an example of like a catabolic reaction. Like if you take this big complex sugar and you cleave it up into individual little tiny sugars so that they can be used for energy production, that's great. That's a catabolic reaction, right? Or if you even take just like glucose and you break glucose down to make ATP, that's a catabolic reaction, right? Then we've got anabolic reactions. Anabolic reactions are totally the opposite direction. These are compounds that building simpler compounds into needed substances by the body. I don't like how they worded that one. This is taking simple stuff and building it up into something more complex. So doing the exact reverse of that, right? So if I eat like a potato, right? What's going to happen is my digestive system will catabolically break that down into individual sugar molecules. And then say I eat that potato a couple hours after I did a workout, right? My workout ate through some of my glycogen stores. So my liver is missing some of its glycogen. My muscles are missing some, obviously. And so anabolically, my body will take all that sugar that I just ate and build it back up into glycogen. And then glycogen will be stored, and so that I have something to catabolically break down again later. So, we always talk about being in like an energy balance, which is how we like measure calories and stuff, which is important, right? We're measuring someone's metabolism and we're trying to maintain, a neutral energy balance at that metabolic rate. But what's kind of funny is like at the deep level, there is no such thing as like a perfect, like balanced version of metabolism. Your metabolism does not transfer stuff over. There's only two directions that metabolism goes. It is either breaking stuff down or building stuff up. There's nothing that's like neutral. So even that process of like breaking stuff down takes energy, and even that process of building stuff up takes energy, which is why there's no way to be in a perfect like energy, perfect energy balance. That's the thing. Like, if we really could solve the world's problems, right? And have infinite energy without having to use like fossil fuels in order to do that, that's the thing, man. Like if we could just invent a perpetual motion machine, we'd be set. Like those steel balls that you drop and they go back and forth. I guess it's like this. It does this thing. And it's like it's perpetual motion. It lasts forever. It never lasts. It doesn't last forever. It just seems like it lasts a long time. But those things lose a little bit of energy every time. That's your metabolism. You think about it, it's like anabolic, catabolic, anabolic, catabolic. And eventually they get smaller and smaller. And then you just need to introduce more energy to the system. And that's where eating comes in, you know? So when we're measuring like our metabolism as we eat, we are measuring how much energy we need in order to like get back to balance, right? So this is where we need to talk about the idea of cellular respiration, right? So cellular respiration is going to describe how the body's cells take in nutrients. Mostly we're talking about glucose here and oxygen as well, though, in order to spit out ATP, right? So we're going to go ahead and you guys know how much I love my crash course videos. If YouTube will load here. So we got two parts to this PowerPoint. Actually, this is a two-parter. All right, taking this back to here. And first part, we're just going to talk about the ingredients. So this first part is mostly nutrition. Second part, we'll actually dive into the ATP production.
I weigh about 80 kilograms. Most of that, let's say 64%, is water, though you can't tell by looking. I mean, as organisms go, I like to think that I look fairly solid. After water, the next largest proportion of me is protein, about 16%. Not just in my muscles, but also in things like the tiny sodium potassium pumps in my neurons and the hemoglobin in my blood and the enzymes driving the chemical reactions in every one of my 37 trillion cells. And another 16% of me is fat, which I'm totally okay with. 4% of me is minerals, like the calcium and phosphorus in my bones and the iron in my blood, and 1% is carbohydrates, most of which is either being consumed as I talk to you or is sitting around as glycogen waiting to be used. But here's the thing, it's not like I just ate 80 kilograms of food and then all this happened. Instead, my body, like yours, is constantly acquiring stuff, extracting some of it to keep, burning some of it for energy, and getting rid of the rest. But even the stuff that my body does hold on to doesn't last forever. Some of the chemicals that I absorb in my food eventually become a part of me, but enzymes wear out and membranes break down and DNA gets oxidized, so they get discarded. And then I need more of those chemicals to reconstruct the material that I've lost. As a result, over the course of my lifetime, my cells will synthesize somewhere between 225 and 450 kilograms of protein. That's like 3 or 4 or 5 separate me's just made of protein. And all the protein and fat and carbohydrates and nucleic acids that make up me, of course, come from food. Every organism has to keep taking in and breaking down food to keep resupplying itself with the raw materials it needs to survive. And all that activity requires energy, which we also gain from food. So how do our bodies actually convert what we eat into energy and raw materials? The answer is a never-ending series of reactions that are dedicated to doing two vital and totally contradictory things. One set of chemical reactions destroys the reactants that you give them, reducing big, complex substances into molecular rubble, and the other set reassembles that rubble into new and bigger products that are put together again to make you. So our bodies are constantly reinventing themselves in a perpetual state of loss, but also always rebuilding. And even though all of this is happening at the cellular level, its consequences could hardly be larger. These two sets of reactions are where everything that we've learned so far about the digestive, endocrine, circulatory, and respiratory systems really starts to come together. Together, these processes make up your metabolism. Now, the sciencey word metabolism has come to have a meaning in popular speech, but metabolism isn't just one thing. People talk about metabolism as meaning like how fast your body burns the fuel in your food or how high your personal energy level is, and that's fine for use by personal trainers and fitness magazines, but physiologically, metabolism really describes every single biochemical reaction that goes on in your body. And maybe more importantly, it reconciles two conflicting chemical processes that are always simultaneously underway inside of you. One of those chemical forces is anabolism. Anabolic reactions construct things and consume energy. These are the processes that take the small monomer building blocks in your food, like monosaccharides and fatty and amino acids, and build them into bigger, more complex polymers like carbs and fats and proteins that are used in your cells. Then, when you need new building blocks or you need to release some energy, those polymers in your body, or new ones in your food, get broken up by catabolic reactions. The processes of catabolism break down bigger molecules and in breaking their bonds, release the energy you need to stay warm and move around and provide your cells with fuel to build those polymers back up again. To be honest, your metabolism is a lot like Sisyphus. It works really hard, but it is never finished. And the boulder that your inner Sisyphus is always pushing uphill and watching fall back down, that's nutrients, the molecules that your body is forever breaking up and then rebuilding only to have them break apart again. And these nutrients, the materials that your body needs to build, maintain, and repair itself, come in 6 major groups. By volume, the majority of what we consume and what makes up our bodies is water. So that's maybe the most vital nutrient. Then there are vitamins, compounds that come in either fat-soluble or water-soluble forms. They aren't used as building blocks or for energy, but they're essential in helping the body make use of other nutrients that do those things. Vitamin C, for example, helps improve iron absorption, while vitamin K is crucial to blood clotting, and some B vitamins are important in the production of ATP from glucose. Minerals, like vitamins, don't provide fuel, but they have all sorts of other functions. Calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus harden bones and teeth, while iron is, of course, crucial in hemoglobin. Plus, potassium, sodium, and chlorine help maintain your body's pH balance and are used in action potentials. So water, vitamins, and minerals are all necessary. But the 3 major nutrients that everyone always talks about, the ones you find on food labels from oatmeal to Pop-Tarts, are carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Most of the carbohydrates you've ever eaten, with the exception of lactose in milk, originally came from plants. Mono and disaccharides come from fruits, honey, sugar beets, and sugar cane, while polysaccharides, starches, come from veggies and grains. The main thing you need to know is that the monosaccharide glucose is the be-all, end-all molecular fuel that your cells need to make ATP. ATP being the molecule that your cells use to drive anabolic reactions when they need to make new polymers or get anything else done, whether that's operating a sodium-potassium pump or detaching the head of a myosin filament to contract a muscle. But ATP is too unstable to store, so cells often store energy in the form of glucose, which they can then catabolize and convert to ATP when they need it. Now, some of your cells can get their energy from fats, but many of the most important ones, like your neurons and red blood cells, feed exclusively on glucose. So most of the carbs that your intestines absorb are converted to glucose for that reason. But if it's not needed right away, that energy can also get stored as glycogen in your liver and muscles, or converted to glycerol and fatty acids to make triglyceride fats. And even though there seems to be some kind of marketing war going on against dietary fats, we most definitely need them. The fats in your adipose tissue store energy, of course, but they also store fat-soluble vitamins and cushion your organs. Lipids also form the myelin that insulates the neurons.
Sorry, it's 1 second. I just want to check what this says. Yeah.
in your brain and throughout your body, as well as the oil in your skin, and they provide the vital calorie content found in breast milk. But there are other important lipids like cholesterol, which is the precursor to things like testosterone and estrogen, and of course phospholipids, which form the cell membrane in every single one of the 3 dozen or so trillion cells you have. Now, if you're into eating meat, a lot of the fat you ingest might come from that, but guess what? Plants have fat too. Plants use lipids for energy storage just like we do, except they do it in fruits and nuts and seeds, which, when you think of it, are kind of like plant breast milk. It's food for their growing babies. Either way, though, when you eat lipids, your body breaks down triglycerides into glycerol and fatty acids. Those molecules can then be processed and used in the making of ATP, or they might be converted into other kinds of fatty acids, which your cells can then reassemble into your very own triglycerides or phospholipids. And your liver happens to be great at converting one fatty acid into another, but there are some it just can't synthesize. For example, omega-6 and 3 fatty acids are called essential fatty acids because your body can't make them, so they have to be ingested. They get turned into all kinds of useful molecules, like the ones used for synapse formation in the brain and for signaling inflammation during the healing process. But if carbohydrates provide energy and fats insulate and store energy, then just about everything else is done with proteins. They form the bulk of your muscle and connective tissue, but they're also what the ion channels and pumps are made of in your neurons and muscle cells, and they make up your enzymes, which are responsible for pretty much every chemical reaction in your body. In other words, your body runs on protein and pretty much is protein. Nutritionally speaking, meats, dairy products, eggs, legumes, nuts, cereals are all particularly high in protein. But because everything we eat was once alive and every cell of every living thing contains protein, as long as you're eating whole foods, you're at least partially restocking your protein supplies. That might seem like you'd have to eat muscle to make muscle or eat enzymes to make enzymes, but that's not how it works. Since all your proteins are made up of just 20 amino acids, the differences between the thousands of unique proteins are simply in the sequence of those amino acids. And of course, you have a specialized molecule that knows just which amino acids to put together in what order to make a certain protein. It's called DNA. When you consume some hamburger, for example, the protein actin in the meat gets catabolized into its component amino acids, which gets mixed up with all of the amino acids from all the other proteins in the meat, like the collagen and elastin and chitin and myosin, as well as all of the proteins from the bun and the tomato and the mayonnaise. Those amino acids then get reassembled using anabolic reactions into your very own but somewhat different proteins as defined by your DNA. Each cell is like a picky little Gordon Ramsay, and it has to have every amino acid needed, every ingredient present before it will even think about starting to make a protein. And just like with your lipids, your cells can improvise and convert some amino acids into others if they're missing an ingredient. However, there are 9 essential amino acids that you cannot make from others and have to eat. Now, lots of foods don't provide every essential amino acid, but when you combine foods like beans and rice or pasta and cheese, you do get all of the essential amino acids, which is important because remember, after water, you are mostly made of protein, on the order of 16%. But what about the 1% of you, the carbohydrates? How that tiniest fraction of you ends up creating all of the energy is what we'll discover next time. But for now, you've learned all about the vital nutrients, including water, vitamins, minerals, carbs, fats, and proteins, as well as how anabolic reactions build structures and require energy, while catabolic reactions tear things apart and release energy. And together, these competing forces form the wonderfully conflicted process known as metabolism. Thank you to our headmaster of learning, Linnea Boyev, and thanks to all of our Patreon patrons whose monthly contributions help make Crash Course possible, not only for themselves, but for everyone everywhere. If you like Crash Course and want to help us keep making videos like this, you can go to patreon.com/Crash Course. This episode was filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio. It was written by Kathleen Yale, edited by Blake DiPestino, and her consultant is Dr. Brandon Jackson. It was directed by Nicholas Jenkins, edited by Nicole Sweeney. Our sound designer is Michael Aranda, and the graphics team is Thought Cafe.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move right into the next one, which is going to cover like we said, how we break down glucose to use all that energy.
Here's a couple of words you might find useful in the study of human metabolism. They also happen to be 2 words that I enjoy in general. Brunch, buffet. I'd throw in all you can eat, but that's kind of implied, and then it would be 6 words unless you hyphenate them. But still, brunch buffet. You got eggs and bacon and French toast and biscuits and fruit and some kind of weird sorted jello thing in there. And once you've paid your $12.99, you know there's a pretty good chance that it's all going to get eaten. But here's the thing. Not everything that you fit into your face during brunch time is going to be handled the same way by your body. After you're done digesting, some nutrients will go straight to your body's pile of stuff to burn right away, but others will have to be converted into something else. For example, the carbs and fats in your buttered toast can be directly oxidized into usable energy, but the amino acids in the bacon have to be converted into molecules that get broken down like carbs if you want to get energy out of them. And while excess carbs and fats can be stored in larger polymer versions of their original forms, any extra amino acids can't be. They have to be converted and then stored as fat or glycogen. So as I've mentioned before, the molecules in your body are constantly changing shape and renewing and rearranging themselves to either build things or to use energy. And eating food replenishes these nutrients, especially glucose. Then, depending on what your body needs and when you last ate, certain hormones like insulin will help decide what to burn and what to store for later. This, of course, is an important function, which is why things can go badly if this process doesn't work properly because of a metabolic disorder like diabetes. In that case, your body can't properly use and store nutritional energy, which makes the very acts of eating and metabolizing more difficult and possibly dangerous. Exactly how glucose levels can spike or plummet, how we convert nutrients into energy, and how all of that relates to eating and hunger and weight, metabolism, and your health in general is, guess what? Complicated. But as you are a living thing that must eat in order to stay alive, I'd say it's worth learning how it works. And brunch is as good a place to start as any. Waiting in line for the all-you-can-eat brunch buffet is a good time to recall the law of conservation of energy. The law simply states that energy can never be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. And the process of metabolism involves conversions of energy, either through catabolizing reactions that release the energy stored in your food or anabolizing ones that use or store that energy. So you can enjoy your short stack of flapjacks and biscuits and gravy, but remember, that energy has to either get released or stored somewhere inside you. Now, the conversion of food energy is part of the great balancing act that is maintaining homeostasis, and one of its greatest tricks is cellular respiration. Cellular respiration is how we derive energy from the food we eat, specifically glucose, which is where most of our food ends up. In order for glucose to become energy we can use, we have to give it some oxygen and convert each sugar molecule into 6 molecules of CO2 and 6 molecules of water, which usually produces about 32 molecules of ATP. Cellular respiration occurs in 3 simultaneous phases where glucose is broken down by glycolysis and other catabolic reactions, and then turned into pyruvic acid and acetyl-CoA, and finally ushered into the Krebs cycle. It's all pretty complicated, but we've covered it extensively in Crash Course Biology, so rather than getting into the blow-by-blow here, I recommend you check out that video for a refresher. For now, just remember that cellular respiration breaks down nutrient molecules to generate ATP, and in doing so, it captures some of the chemical energy that was in those bonds for use in your body. Now, when it comes to how that energy is converted and where, that depends largely on when you ate your last meal. We all switch back and forth between 2 nutritional states, the absorptive or fed state, which is during or after eating, and the post-absorptive or fasting state, when the GI tract is empty and the body is running off of stored supplies. So say you're just post-brunch buffet and you're still in the absorptive state, unbuckling your belt as your digestive system breaks up the eggs and bacon and French toast and syrup into a bunch of mostly glucose molecules that pass into your bloodstream. The first bit of glucose gets delivered throughout the body and is tapped to generate ATP on the spot through cellular respiration. But since the meal was big and rich, there's more glucose floating around than your cells need at the moment. And remember, ATP is too unstable to be used for storage, which means all the extra glucose is going to get stored as fat or glycogen. And that storage is part of how you can end up gaining weight, because how much energy gets stored depends partly on your basal metabolic rate. That's the number of daily calories your body needs to do business as usual. And that rate can be influenced by your age, your sex, and body size or composition. A young bodybuilder is going to burn way more calories than that tiny grandma, but generally, if you're absorbing more nutrients than you're burning, you will gain weight. So yeah, for that, you can blame the law of conservation of energy. Now, of course, all nutrients are important. I mean, your body is basically made of protein, so that's kind of key. But in terms of immediate fuel, glucose is the easiest source of food for cells like your neurons, and it is always a good policy to keep your brain well fed so it doesn't get hangry or dead. So your body likes to maintain a blood glucose level of 70 to 100 milligrams per deciliter. But let's say that thanks to the buffet, you've now got 140 milligrams per deciliter. This means too much sugar is swimming around in your blood and your body isn't happy about it. If your blood sugar levels get too high, it can damage blood vessels, especially those in the nervous system, heart, kidneys, eyes, and extremities. That's why diabetes is often associated with a higher risk of heart and kidney disease, loss of vision, and foot amputation. But typically, rising blood sugar levels sets off a series of events that trim them back down. Specifically, they trigger special beta cells in the pancreas to start secreting more of the hormone that regulates everything that happens when you're in the absorptive state. And this hormone is the all-powerful insulin. Insulin's job in this instance is to move glucose out of the blood and into storage. And to do that, it triggers a shift from catabolic reactions to anabolic ones. For example, it puts a stop to glycogenolysis, or breaking down glycogen in your liver and muscles to release glucose for energy, and instead ramps up the process of glycogenesis, where extra glucose is linked together to form glycogen. It also activates lipogenesis, where very cool chemical reactions in the liver convert glucose to triglycerides and then ship them off to your adipose tissue for storage. A similar thing happens with the extra fatty acids that you got from the eggs and bacon that aren't immediately needed for energy. They get processed through lipogenesis too and are rebuilt back into triglycerides and then tucked away for a rainy day. The thing is, if you're thinking about this, all these lipids hate water, right? Fat and water don't mix. So you should be asking yourself, how can they be transported in the blood when they're so hydrophobic? The answer is lipoproteins, 4 specialized proteins made by the liver that surround fats and allow them to move in the bloodstream as an emulsion. You've probably heard of some of these. One is low-density lipoprotein, also known as Ldl cholesterol. It's what delivers some of the glucose and fat that you just ate to your body's fat deposits. Another is high-density lipoprotein, or HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol. It starts out as an empty protein packet sent out by the liver to gather up other cholesterols from the blood and artery walls and other cells. HDL then delivers the cholesterol back to the liver or to places like the ovaries, testes, and adrenal glands, which use it to make steroid hormones. All right, so now your body has put all the glucose and lipids and proteins where they need to go, and you can just coast into the post-absorptive state. But several hours later, even though your small intestine is still working on what's left of the buffet, your cells have been helping themselves to the remaining glucose in the blood, and eventually your blood sugar level will start to drop. drop. Remember, your neurons are on an exclusive glucose meal plan, so they need sugar at the ready. And if your body senses an imbalance in blood sugar levels, it sounds the alarm. A decrease in glucose stimulates alpha cells in the pancreas to release insulin's nemesis, the hormone glucagon. It starts raising the blood sugar level by triggering the liver and adipose tissues to metabolize their fat and glycogen stores, thereby releasing fatty acids, glycerol, and glucose back into the blood. But if it's been a day or two since you've eaten, for some reason, and you've burned through both your blood glucose and your glycogen stores, and you don't have any sugars left to feed your brain, in that case, your body will launch into gluconeogenesis and convert fats and amino acids into glucose, so ATP synthesis can continue in your brain cells. This process is a sort of last-ditch effort by the body to protect the nervous system from the damaging effects of low blood sugar. Now, of course, this whole system has its flaws, and one of them is that the whole setup is almost entirely dependent on the proper release and reception of insulin. People with diabetes either don't produce enough insulin or have abnormal receptors for it, which is why they often have to inject a pharmaceutical version of the chemical after eating. Otherwise, their blood sugar levels will remain too high, and they'll start peeing out large amounts of glucose to try and balance the levels in the blood. The problem is, because glucose is being excreted and not stored, it's not available when the blood sugar starts to drop. So the body has to draw on fat and protein tissues for energy, which is one reason why sudden weight loss can be an early sign of diabetes. Whether you're diabetic or not, I think we can all agree that it is important to respect your blood sugar levels and remember to continue feeding the beast. But at brunch, just, use small plates. Try to keep the trips to the buffet line under 5 or so. Today, you learned how your body uses energy from food, including through cellular respiration, which converts glucose into ATP, glycogenesis, which converts it to glycogen, and lipogenesis, which converts it to triglycerides. And you also learned how insulin regulates your sugar levels. Thank you to our headmaster of learning, Linnea Boyev, and thank you to all of our Patreon patrons whose monthly contributions help make Crash Course possible, not only for themselves, but for everyone everywhere. If you like Crash Course and want to help us keep making videos like this one, you can go to patreon.com/crashcourse. This episode was filmed in the Dr. Cheryl C. Kinney Crash Course studio. It was written by Kathleen Yell, edited by Blake T. Pastino, and our consultant is Dr. Brandon Jackson. It was directed by Nicholas Jenkins, edited by Nicole Sweeney. Our sound designer is Michael Aranda, and the graphics team is Thought Cafe.
Okay, so that is why we got to talk about metabolism. So looking at it, right, looking at the types of metabolism that we have here, one of the ways that we're going to describe using those proteins, fats, and carbs, primarily carbs, for energy is we're going to be talking about the process of cellular respiration. So in the same way that, like, if you think about, like, if you asked even just like a kid who maybe hasn't studied cellular respiration, but if you ask them like why we breathe, right, they'd probably say, well, we breathe because it keeps us alive, and then, we exhale. So like, that's kind of how that works, right? Like, you bring in oxygen, and you're doing that so that your cells can bring in oxygen, and then those cells exhale CO2, and then we exhale CO2. So all of that is happening, in these large versions. The way that we describe like that overall process is through, describing what's called cellular respiration, right? How the body's cells take in nutrients like glucose and oxygen, and we use it to produce ATP. So glucose and oxygen go in, carbon dioxide and ATP come out. There we go. This is the chart I'm looking for. So looking at this process, right, if we're talking about like what cellular respiration really is, it's going to break down into a couple different sections here. And, these sections are producing ATP at very different speeds. So for instance, like anaerobic respiration, which we call glycolysis primarily, is really, 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 really fast. It is really quick at breaking down ATP rapidly, but it doesn't actually produce that much ATP in every go. Basically, for every molecule of glucose you have, you are going to get about 2 molecules of ATP afterwards. So that's not very much, but you kind of want to think of it as like, almost like a jab in boxing, right? Like, it's quick, it doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does like allow you to maybe send another one really quickly. So you could just jab, jab, jab pretty rapidly, even though that's not really going to deal much damage, That's kind of how glycolysis is. It's spitting out very small amounts very, 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 very rapidly. So anaerobic respiration, I know that we've been through this before. And anaerobic respiration consists of both the phosphagen, creatine phosphate system, which is that 6 to 10 second system, and it consists of glycolysis. But in this PowerPoint, we're going to skip straight to glycolysis. We're not talking about the ATP system today, or ATP-PC system today. So glycolysis is going to describe how our body produces ATP in the cytoplasm of our cells, and it will yield 2 ATP per molecule. So when you talk about glycolysis, right, this is taking place, let's see here, actually. What? Nope. I need just a picture of a cell. All right. Animal cell. Okay, so here's your typical animal cell, right? That we've been talking about here. And here are these little, they look like potato bugs. These are the mitochondria, right? So this is our mitochondria right here. So what's going to happen during this, right? If I actually, I'm just going to steal this and open this up and paste it, and then zoom out a little bit. Steal just this part. Okay, so here is your sort of typical animal cell, right? And I'm just going to go ahead and delete all this so that I have some space. So glycolysis is going to produce ATP right in here. It's going to produce ATP just in this sort of empty space right here. So that's glycolysis. Right, and that empty space, all of this is taking place in what we call the cytoplasm, right? So the cytoplasm is the fluid of our cells. It's a non-oxygen environment because, just like if you're in any other fluid, right? Can't really breathe when you're underwater, right? We don't have gills. Your cells don't either. So we are producing some ATP in this little fluid area right here. But what happens is you are left with 2 end products. Glycolysis is going to result in a little bit of ATP, right? That's one of our products here. And it's also going to result in a little bit of what we call pyruvic acid, or sometimes we just call these your pyruvates, okay? And so those pyruvates are really, really important because they're a byproduct, right? And because they're a byproduct, we could either just get rid of them and just, use them as like a waste product, which is how our body does with a lot of our byproducts. But in cellular respiration's case, what's going to happen is we're actually going to let that pyruvate move across the cellular membrane, and it's going to work its way. So now we're left with, and we'll put this right here. We'll say you're left with pyruvates, or pyruvic acid. And now those pyruvates, they're actually going to move from here. So this is going to make that. They're going to move from here inside the mitochondria. And now that those pyruvates are inside the mitochondria, now we are also going to take a little bit of oxygen, and we are going to put that inside the mitochondria as well. And all of that is going to spit out massive amounts of ATP. This is what's really going to kind of be the big money maker. But you'll understand that this is a little bit slower, right? Because it has to have glycolysis happening underneath it in the background, right? So glycolysis is happening and it's spitting out lots of ATP, little bits of ATP, but really, really, really rapidly. And it's also making lots and lots and lots of pyruvates. Pyruvates are now going to go through this very big, complicated cycle called the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. That is our aerobic cellular metabolism, right? So aerobic respiration. So anaerobic respiration takes place in the fluid of our cells. The easiest way to remember that that's anaerobic is just to remember, it's like, yeah, we can't breathe under fluid, right? We can't breathe underwater. But then we have our aerobic cellular respiration. And the aerobic cellular respiration is going to produce ATP, and it's going to require some oxygen. So what happens to those pyruvates before they move across this membrane, right, is those pyruvates are in this non-oxygenated environment, right? So anybody in here, and I'm sure everybody has probably done this, unless, you know, you just are all perfect. But I know I've done this plenty of times. If you have ever left your protein shaker in the car and you left the lid on, right? You left that cap on the lid, and, you know, maybe there's a little bit of like fluid left in there and stuff, you know, and then you found that freaking protein shaker maybe a day or two later. You pop the lid open and you're like, oh my God, like, and it's just the worst smell in the world, you know? That smell, like that, what you are smelling, it's sour, right? It smells very, you know, kind of sour and nasty, right? What happened is you experience, you know, the materials that were in that protein shake experienced fermentation. So fermentation is how we make beer and wine and, you know, things like yogurt, kimchi, kombucha, right? All of that means that you are basically introducing a little bit of sugar, which acts as like food for bacteria, and you do it in a non-oxygen environment. And so that bacteria eats that sugar and basically farts out this highly fermented stuff, right? That's what like when you look at like a yogurt, right? If you guys have ever looked at like yogurt nutrition facts, you'll notice that the friggin' nutrition facts on yogurt sometimes look a little freaky. You know how people always say like don't eat anything that you can't understand what it is on a nutrition label. It's like good luck understanding what some of these friggin' yogurt cultures are. Let's see the freaking cultures. Come on. There we go. Look, I mean, you can see, like, look at some of these, you know, no, those are all cornstarch and stuff. That you're not listing out the freaking cultures. There we go. Good Lord. So you can see on this yogurt container, it says that it has got S thermophilosis. I don't know. I can never announce the lactobacillus acidophilus. Blah, blah. Big complex friggin' bacteria strains. There are tons of bacteria strains out there, but these are all good bacteria strains. You know, bacteria are these little like living creatures, right? Lactobacillus, bifidus, KCI, reminosus, thermophilus. That's all right. So there's all these like different bacterial strains, and so you're gonna have some of those in your protein shake. And you know, there's also little bits of sugar in your protein shake and stuff. So when you leave that freaking thing, you know, with the lid on, it ferments, and you're basically making like fermented protein. That's why it smells so freaking bad. This is also why like kombucha is really sour, you know, or when you go into like if you've ever been to like a brewery, you're like, God, it smells terrible in here. That's, you know, all the fermentation that's happening. That's all the bacteria that's basically spitting out energy along with like all of these pyruvates, and those pyruvates ferment, right? So what happened here in the fluid portion, non-oxygen environment, is those pyruvates fermented, and then they move into the mitochondria where there is a lot of oxygen being introduced as well. And once you introduce oxygen to that pyruvic acid, which by this point has fermented into what we call lactic acid, which we're probably all familiar with. Once that's fermented into lactic acid, now it can go through this process where it gets converted into what is this other enzyme called acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA. Good Lord, can't spell it. And basically, it looks something kind of like this. You know what? Let's just look at the Krebs cycle. So basically, your lactic acid ferments become, your pyruvates ferment to become lactic acid, which gets converted into acetyl-CoA. And acetyl-CoA is now going to go through this big, complicated wheel using all of these other little like enzymes, which are actually synthesized from your B vitamins. This is one of the reasons why we need to have B vitamins in our diet, and why they say B vitamins give you energy. And so these little B vitamins are just going to cleave off these little high energy molecules called NAD and FAD. And it just does a whole bunch, and you're left with a whole bunch of NAD and FAD, but you are also left with just a little bit of ATP. So during aerobic glycolysis, which again is taking place in the mitochondria, you're first going to start in this big complicated cycle here, which is called the citric acid cycle, although it's more commonly referred to as the Krebs cycle, named after the guy who discovered it. And so the Krebs cycle is how our body produces 2 more ATP in the mitochondria by using the byproducts of glycolysis. So those pyruvates fermented, they became a byproduct, and that byproduct is what we used to, be our ingredients to produce energy, right? So Krebs cycle spits out a little bit of ATP, and then it spits out a little bit of these byproducts, NAD and FAD. And now those byproducts are going to go through this final step, which is the electron transport chain. And the electron transport chain is going to produce 32 ATP in the mitochondria, and it's using the byproducts of the last cycle. So this actually uses NAD and FAD, and it squeezes all of their protons together to produce a whole bunch of ATP. And then we're left with a little bit of CO2 as a byproduct. That's the stuff that we have to exhale, and a little bit of water as a byproduct as well, because this is a synthesis reaction, right? So it's dehydrating, and you're left with water afterwards, because it's squeezing stuff together. So that is sort of how this looks. So this is kind of an interesting little picture here that I've got a better version pulled up on the internet here. So in the cytoplasm of our cell, right? So that's the fluid portion of the cell. A glucose molecule, which is a 6-carbon molecule, there's 6 carbon molecules in glucose, is going to spit out 2 ATP, and it's going to spit out 2 bits of pyruvic acid, which each have 3 carbons in them each. So that's why we have glucose is originally 6 carbons. Half of it gets split into this half of the pyruvic acid, half of it gets split into this half of the pyruvic acid. So you're left with there's those original 6 carbons. Then, because this is in the cytoplasm, which is a non-oxygen environment, just like your protein shaker with the lid on is a there's some oxygen in there, which is why you can get away with leaving the lid on there for a little while. You might find that protein shaker the next day in your car and you'll be fine, right? But 2 or 3 days later, that's where we start to run into problems. It's because all the oxygen got eaten up by the bacteria that's living in that protein. Once it's out of oxygen, they all suffocate and ferment, right? So in this fluid, that fermentation process happens pretty quickly. So those pyruvates ferment into lactic acid, and now lactic acid is going to go into and pass into the mitochondria along with some oxygen. And so that's going to spit out about 30 to, they're saying 30 here. We saw this is 32 here. Some people say 34, 36. Kind of depends on how efficient your cells are, how good they are at doing this, how many B vitamins you have in your diet. We're still studying this stuff. We don't exactly have perfect numbers for this, but that's what's going to spit out massive amounts of ATP. And that, like I said, happens in the mitochondria, which is an aerobic section. So the cytoplasm, which is fluid, that's an anaerobic process, and for opposite, aerobic for oxygen. So opposite, not having oxygen, versus aerobic reaction, which is having plenty of oxygen, right? So here's what that kind of looks like in a little bit of a different picture here that I love this chart here. So glycolysis is going to take place in the cytoplasm, where glucose is going to get broken down into pyruvate. And that pyruvate is going to pass into the mitochondria, where it'll go through the Krebs cycle, and it will spit out a whole bunch of NAD and FAD. And then NAD and FAD are going to go through the electron transport chain, which is also taking place in the mitochondria. and that has a whole bunch of hydrogen that gets all squeezed together to spit out even more ATP. So this chart right here, I love it. This is kind of it kind of just shows you very elegantly sort of how this process is taking place from section to section to section. So, okay, so now we know that it kind of moves from glycolysis first into into Krebs, into electron transport. So that means that we go from anaerobic to aerobic, right? So when you first start exercising, the cells that you start recruiting to produce energy are needing to produce massive amounts of energy to meet the demands of whatever exercise it is that you're doing. So it starts with glycolysis, right? So it'll start with glycolysis to produce a little bit of ATP, but again, that doesn't produce massive amounts of ATP. It just produces a little bit of ATP very, very rapidly, but it does start producing a whole bunch of those pyruvates. And those pyruvates are then going to start going through the Krebs cycle. And once they start going through the Krebs cycle, we're going to spit out more ATP before going into the electron transport chain, before spitting out massive amounts of ATP. So here's the thing, though. If you are producing more lactic acid through glycolysis than you are bringing in oxygen, then that lactic acid starts to pool and it starts to just kind of hang around, which makes your muscles burn like crazy. So we start to get to this place where we are producing more lactic acid than our mitochondria can process. And when that happens, that's where you start to like really feel like the burn, because there's all this like extra hydrogen building up inside of your muscles. You start to feel really fatigued, and your muscle, your legs are starting to feel like they're 1,000 pounds, where it's really difficult for you to be able to kind of get uphill. So how do you recover? Well, you slow down, you stop doing as much exercise. That gives your body time to bring in more oxygen. And so we start burning up that burning up that lactic acid and getting converted into ATP. Now, this is where I love to bring this up. Everybody in here has probably experienced this. If you've ever done like high intensity interval training, HIIT training, where you just really amp up your intensity like crazy, right? It's where you're doing super high intensity and then you recover at low intensity, right? You kind of zigzag back and forth. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm done with interval training, don't get me wrong, like it's exhausting and my muscles feel worn out and I feel like I really like killed it in the workout. But do you ever notice how like you feel like you have a ton of energy after you're done? Like I get this all the time. Like when I'm done, I'm like walking out of the gym and I'm like, I feel like I'm $1,000,000. Like I feel like I'm like hyper. I got like so much energy right now. Because what happened is like, produced a whole bunch of lactic acid in that final, intense sprint. And then like I started recovering after that final sprint is over, and all of that lactic acid just gets converted into a bunch of ATP. So now you get all this like energy run throughout your body and you feel great. Like I feel like $1,000,000 because I don't have to do another like intense round. So I've got a surplus of energy, which is, leads your body feeling warm for the rest of the day. I don't know if you ever noticed that as well. You feel really hot for the rest of the day after you're done doing interval training in particular. Part of that is like temperature because of like ATP production, but a large part of it is also just simply blood's flowing through your body like crazy. And blood's flowing through your body like crazy because it's trying to deliver oxygen as efficiently as possible. So that is our review of ATP. Hopefully, I know we've definitely gone over that more in depth in other classes, but does anybody have any questions on that? Is anybody worried about any of that? Anything that I said that was confusing? Everybody feeling good? All righty. So now let's go ahead and talk again. Actually, let's just really quickly before we move forward, mentioning we've been talking about ATP this whole time. I didn't really fill you guys in on, I didn't mention what ATP is because we kind of, I know everybody in here has been through our physiology class, but just as a review, so if you guys ever see this definition, ATP is a high energy molecule that consists of a molecule of adenosine with 3 phosphates attached to it. So, there's a lot of energy trapped between those phosphates, particularly the last 2 of them. And so, what your body will do is it will break off ATP It'll break off that third phosphate to release all the energy that was trapped there. This little bond, there's a phosphate, there's a phosphate, there's a phosphate. It'll break this bond right here to release a whole bunch of energy. And that's how we do all of our work, right? There we go, right? You can see it right there. There's the adenosine. And then we break that bond and a whole bunch of energy is released. That's why we need to produce so much of it, because we can't just passively hold energy inside of our body. Energy is too unstable. If you try to hold energy in your body, it'll just get converted into heat. And then that heat will basically just like heat you up and you'll end up burning up. Spontaneous human combustion, So luckily that's not the case. Now, obviously there's a rate at which all of this happens, right? And that's where we do have like our metabolic rate, right? We have like our metabolism, your basal metabolic rate, your resting unit, TDEE, all of those are versions of measuring metabolic rate, right? TDEE is the one we usually spend most of our time talking about because that's the total amount of energy that you burn every day, which, is your, that is your metabolism times your, factoring in your energy burning. So your basal metabolic rate plus processing food, plus like any physical activity that you do. So your metabolic rate, we refer to that as the rate at which energy is released from nutrients inside of our cells, right? So it's how much we are doing all this. We measure it in calories, right? And the main source of energy that we're going to be talking about here is glucose, right? Like glucose is our favorite source of energy. Now you can use fat to do this as well, right? If we look at like beta oxidation is where your body will actually oxidize a fat molecule in order to be left with acetyl-CoA. You know what? This will work actually. This is a little bit more complicated than we need, but you can see like a fatty acid basically will be converted into that acetyl-CoA so it can go through the Krebs cycle here. And again, it's this big wheel, so it's just constantly like repeating itself and cycling over and over and over again. So you can skip glycolysis. You can go straight to the Krebs cycle. This is what people who are on like a keto diet are doing, right? They're eating like a heavy amount of fat, which is being, oxidized and just converted into acetyl-CoA directly. Which is why that has led to people to believe that like keto diets burn fat more effectively than any other type of diet, because it is literally burning fat for energy. That is true, but it doesn't mean that you're better at like burning body fat outside of your body. That there's not a lot of like truth to that. Like I get it, like it makes a lot of sense, but that would be like saying, the semi truck that carries gasoline to, gas stations and stuff, the semi truck runs on diesel and yeah, it's carrying gasoline, but just because it's been carrying gasoline for years, and it doesn't mean it can run on gasoline now, doesn't make it any better at it. Same thing is true with keto, right? Like just because keto means that we are oxidizing fat for energy production doesn't mean that your body's tapping into your fat cells more efficiently. What's going to result in weight loss, guys, is a calorie deficit. Again, kind of going back to that concept. Because if you're in a calorie deficit on a high carbohydrate diet, guess what? You're in a calorie deficit. So your body's going to go, well, great, we had plenty of carbs and I've got plenty of energy, but I still need more calories. And so it's going to tap into your fat cells and it's going to get those calories. You're going to lose weight, right? So energy deficit's what is important here. Now your metabolic rate, like I said, we love glucose. It's our favorite way to produce energy. That's why our body stores glucose so efficiently as glycogen, and why it's so easy for us to break down glycogen for energy production. Our body stores fat as well, and then we're really good at breaking that down, but just slightly slower. So your body doesn't prefer to use it. So the rate at which all that happens, it's going to decrease as we get older. That's one thing that we do need to be aware of. This is why so many of the metabolism formulas will always ask you like what your age is. But here's the thing, like, when we're using this glucose, right, which we store as like form of liver, we've got other forms of energy here stored as well. We've got glycerol, right? Fatty acids, amino acids. Amino acids can be used. Your body doesn't want to use them. If you are in severely limited capacity to get calories, right? Like let's say you're just not getting very many calories in your diet, your body's going to go, all right, like I got to protect the nervous system. That's the number one thing that your body is most in tune to protect because it's the control center for everything. So your body will go, all right, well, we're going to eat some of that calf muscle. Right? And it'll start breaking down the proteins inside of your muscle cells or maybe enzymes or whatever in order to, convert those into carbohydrates so that it can use those carbohydrates for energy. So not a big fan of doing that, by the way. That's a process called gluconeogenesis, and we do not want to do it. So we prefer to give our body enough glucose so that it doesn't break into our muscle stores. We want to keep it, if we are going to burn from somewhere, we want to burn into our fat cells. So all of this metabolism stuff is going to be really important. When we're talking about like anabolic, building stuff up, we need to make sure that we have other ingredients as well, like building new skeletal muscle not skeletal muscle, but there's building new like skeletal tissue, right? You're building new bones. Takes phosphorus and calcium, and it takes some energy in order to like fuel that whole building process. So we need to make sure that minerals are something that we also consume, right? Minerals, which are chemical elements that aid in our metabolism. They give our body structure, like calcium and phosphorus. They assist in fluid balance, like sodium and potassium. Those are your electrolytes. Muscle contractions, also calcium, right? That's a big one. And then blood clotting, right? That's a really big one here. You got iron inside of your blood, for instance. Really important to make sure that we have plenty of minerals in our diet to allow for metabolic reactions, right? And then vitamins as well. Vitamins are also complex substances. Vitamins actually look kind of similar chemically to proteins, actually, but they don't have any energy the way proteins do. And vitamins, are also going to assist in metabolism, right? So you've got your fat-soluble vitamins and your water-soluble vitamins. Vitamin K, also very important for blood clotting. Vitamin C, really important to keep your immune system healthy and to absorb things like iron. B vitamins, all those, like if we look at all the enzymes in the Krebs cycle, coenzymes. If you take a look at these, they are really big, crazy, complicated names. They're calling, they got like citric acid here. Here's a much better version. Really? That's how pixelated that is? There we go. So you take a look. You look at all these friggin' crazy long pyruvate carboxylase, oxaloacetate, ketoglutarate, right? Like all these like big long crazy names. A lot of these are actually little coenzymes, and you're going to get them from things like B vitamins. So B vitamins are really good at sort of producing these coenzymes. So love B vitamins. They're really good for, they don't have any energy of their own. But again, remember an enzyme's job is to kick off reactions. So we're really glad to have those. And then some vitamins do my favorite thing, which is that they might help you stabilize free radicals. So they will actually sometimes act as antioxidants, particularly your fat-soluble vitamins are very, very good at acting as antioxidants, although vitamin C is as well. But these are vitamins that are, transported and dissolved in fat, vitamins A, D, E, and K. Again, helping utilize minerals, helping in physiologic processes. But when you look at like antioxidants, right? When you look at antioxidants, what they do is they have like these little extra electrons. They have little extra electrons, and a free radical, which is basically an atom that's missing an electron. So what it wants to do is it wants to strip electrons from its environment. This is like when you talk about like radioactive stuff, those are basically kind of super intense versions of free radicals. Like when you see like the radiation from like, the Chernobyl disaster or anything like that, right? Radiation is basically just where there are atoms flying around crazy quick that are just stripping electrons from the environment, and that's what it means to be kind of radioactive. They're just stripping electrons from everywhere. So if you go there, your cells have their electrons stripped from them, and then your cells start to, do really, really, really bad stuff inside the body. It starts to damage all of your tissues. So antioxidants have extra electrons. So what they are willing to do is they're willing to donate their electrons away. They act as like a little meat shield, They're there to like protect you. So one of the ways you can protect yourself from different types of cancers and tumors and things like that is to consume a diet that is very high in antioxidants, and that will have very protective properties. This is why like doctors will put cancer patients on like juicing diets. And then that let everybody be like, oh, juicing is incredible for you. It's like, well, antioxidants are incredible for you. You don't necessarily have to get it from juice, but when you're going through like chemotherapy, your appetite is like severely reduced. So how do we get all those antioxidants in without feeling like we're eating tons of food? Juicing becomes like a really, elegant solution. Now, I do want to point one thing out here. You're going to see the nutritional guidelines. You'll notice these are ever so slightly different. These are ever so slightly different than we see on our regular NASM. We're going to see 45 to 65% normally. These are just, this is like the Memler's recommendation. So I don't want you guys to memorize these. But in general, these aren't bad. We're going to see 15 to 20 here instead of 15 to 25. They're around 30 here. This isn't a bad choice. This isn't terrible. It's just not in line with the direct USDA recommendations. So don't memorize these numbers. Memorize the ones that are in our other notes. And then just going through like our different types of carbohydrates again here. We've got, for carbs, we've got simple sugars versus complex carbs. Simple sugars are either, a double sugar molecule or just regular old straight sugar. And then we've got complex carbs, which are, starches, plant fibers, things like that. Then we've got, what we're looking for here inside of our normal diet. We want to make sure that our diet is mostly complex carbs, right? Mainly coming from complex, because complex means that it's going to take longer for your digestive system to break down. So because it takes longer to break down, it will keep your glucose levels at normal. If you bring in just too much sugar, it might spike your glucose levels up above 125 milligrams per deciliter of blood. If that happens, your body goes, whoa, too much sugar in the blood, and it produces a massive amount of insulin. And then that insulin might drop your levels below 85, which will lead to like hunger. And then when you're really hungry, you eat a massive amount of sugars again, and then you spike up above 125, and your body's like, come on, and you have a really hard time getting into balance. So we like carbohydrates that are complex because that's going to keep us somewhere in the middle here. You're releasing little bits at a time, Then we've got our different types of fats. We've got our saturated versus unsaturated. Saturated are typically coming from animal sources. They are also usually solid at room temperature. That's why the fat on a steak is very solid. But then we've also got like unsaturated fats, which are, derived from plant matter typically. And these usually are liquid at room temperature. You think of like your olive oils, your canola oils, things like that. And when we say saturated versus unsaturated, this is what we mean. You'll see like, if you think of this as like a table, all the seats at the table are filled, but over here, we've got a couple empty chairs. This is a saturated fat. It's saturated with people sitting at the table. And this is unsaturated with some, slots available, places for people to sit. Then we've got our proteins, right? Proteins, you've got most of them, we're talking, when we generally talk about protein, a lot of times we're talking about animal proteins. Animal proteins are the types of proteins that we consider a complete protein because they have all amino acids in them. And the whole point of eating proteins is to get your amino acids. Vegetable proteins are typically missing one or two essential amino acids, which means if you want to have like a complete amino acid profile, you need to pair your vegetables up together. You need to make sure you're consuming, grains and beans or beans and seeds, something like that. And then that's going to make sure that you're pairing up and filling in any of the gaps. There are a couple plant sources, by the way, that do have a full amino acid profile. Soy is a really good example. This is why soy products are so popular amongst like vegans, because they are complete proteins, even though they are plant matter. Quinoa is another one. Those are only the two I remember. There's so many more. Oh, I'm gonna sneeze. Hold on. So you can see here, right? Legumes like beans and grains like rice. This is missing these two. This is missing these two. But if you consume them together, boom, they fill in each other's gaps. Now there are ways that like you can, a lot of people will try to get their, then we know that vitamins and minerals are important, and so people will sometimes try to get them from supplementation. So supplements, pretty controversial, especially like multivitamins. I mean, there is not a lot of long-term scientific evidence that suggests that a standard like multivitamin has ever done anything for anyone. So vitamins are kind of a crock. That being said, for the most part, they're not likely to hurt you. So if you feel like they make you feel better, and you want to continue taking a multivitamin, go for it. It's not likely to hurt you. So do it to it, However, there are some vitamins that can hurt you because they have like toxic effects when you're taking in excess. So for instance, men who reach out and take like multivitamins that have like iron in them, for instance, sometimes they'll get like way too much iron in their diet, which can cause like a lot of problems. And so your liver gets kind of toxic with all that iron. So your body seeks a way to get that iron out of the body. But generally, like those toxic levels, it's pretty rare. I mean, I honestly, I've actually not known any client in my whole career to, have toxic effects from vitamins, at least not that they've ever told me or that I've ever put together. I've definitely had clients get sick under my watch, I go to the doctor and, figure something out, but I've never had one come back and say like, yeah, I was getting too many vitamins and minerals, So how do we make sure that we're getting plenty of these vitamins and minerals? Well, going back to our nutrition class, the USDA is going to recommend using what is called the MyPlate, which is basically where you're going to try to eat half of your plate from fruits and vegetables as often as possible. A quarter of it from like whole grain sources, so like complex carbs, and then about a quarter of it coming from like a nice lean protein. And then they do recommend a little bit of dairy there because it is the United States, but it is a good source of like calcium and some other things. So this is a very common recommendation, here. Alcohol as well, not a nutrient and kind of screws up your metabolism. So it should be consumed in moderation or really not at all. They used to say like a glass of wine at dinner was actually healthy for you. Now we know that that's pretty much a crock. There really is just no benefits to alcohol, not a one, except for, the social benefits. So, the reason they thought wine made people healthier is they're like, oh, it's rich in antioxidants. No. Alcohol is always bad for us. But that being said, if it loosens you up and allows you to relax more in your life, being relaxed is very good for you. So you might be balancing them out. So obviously we know that like obesity can be caused by an excess of all these calories coming in, right? But there are a lot of like complex causes to obesity. It can be your lifestyle, it can be your activity level, it can be your genetics. But generally the way we're going to measure this, these are all the stats you guys have seen before. BMI is anywhere from 25 to 30. Anything is considered overweight. Anything above 30 is considered obese. And normal BMI is going to be 18.5 up to 24.9. So that's going to be our normal BMI level. If you are outside of those normal ranges, it increases your risk of certain diseases like diabetes. Being a BMI of less than 18.5, which is dramatically underweight, is also really bad. It starts to result in reproductive issues, nutritional deficiencies, low energy reserves, mood swings, other metabolic disorders. It's really, underweight is honestly a lot of times like more dangerous than being overweight, at least in terms of how quickly it can cause problems. So the way that we calculate your BMI, it is your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. Now I will say, if we look at this, right, 134-pound person, that is 164 inches, that's going to be, 61 kilograms divided by 2.6 meters, which is 1.6 squared, right? That's a BMI of 23.5. That puts them right in a normal range. Now, obviously, with all this metabolism stuff that we're talking about, we know that heat is going to be a byproduct of that metabolism. A lot of heat energy is going to get lost. And so we have a lot of different ways that we regulate our heat. It's going to be produced by your body when you're doing exercise or making hormones, or even eating food actually raises your temperature, because your body is going through catabolic reactions. It's breaking stuff down. And it is going, it's demolishing stuff, right? So, that is going to result in excess heat. And so that heat is going to be, stuck inside of your body. So your tissue temperature is going to rise. Most of our heat is lost through our skin, by the way. This is why your skin's your largest organ in your body. It creates a lot of surface area. We as adults have a lot of surface area. So it's very easy for us to regulate our body temperature. Kids who live in the same world as us have a lot tinier little, they got little tiny itty bitty bodies. So because of that, kids are actually very, very, very bad at regulating their tissue temperatures. And that's why if you're training youths, you need to be aware that they overheat very, very easily, but they also get cold really, really easily. So you have to encourage your kid, youth clients, parents, dress them in layers. A jacket with a long sleeve shirt over a t-shirt, and it's you can always strip a layer off to keep the temperature normal, but then if they start to get cold, they can put a layer back on. That's a really big deal, by the way. So make sure the rows in. We'll talk more about that in the youth class at the end of this mod, but these are the different ways that we lose heat. Some of it is just passive radiation, where heat's just kind of going away. There's also convection, where you might notice that you cool down when a cool breeze runs across you. That's because that air is grabbing your heat and carrying it away from you. There's also just simple evaporation, which is water molecules evaporating carries some of that heat passively away. And then there's also conduction, where when you touch something, you're passively passing heat away to it. So radiation's the atmosphere, convection is wind, evaporation's fluid, and conduction is solids, basically. So a lot of different ways we can regulate our body temperatures. Your body can constrict blood vessels to try to maintain your body temperature. It can also dilate blood vessels to help carry it away. So when you're sweaty, your blood vessels are dilated. This is why warming up is so good for us before exercise. We start doing we do a 5-minute walk on the treadmill that dilates all of our blood vessels. Now it's going to be easier for blood to get to all the various tissues of the body. When you're cold, the exact opposite is true. Your blood vessels constrict. When I was in cross country in high school, our cross country course was around this lake, and called Lake Coffinberry. And we would all, cross country is a winter sport. So it was winter in Oregon, and it was very, very cold. And we would always do the same thing. We'd run the race, and, you'd sprint at the end. And we had this big uphill bit at the very, very end of the course. And we'd sprint, you'd be like, your body was just crazy hot. And then once the whole team was all finished, it was who was the toughest. And it's you would run and jump into the lake in the freaking winter, and it was free. And you would feel you jump in there and your body be super hot, and then the cold water, and you could just feel your muscles just and it was you felt like your heart was going to stop. And it was so intense. And we'd all try to be the toughest by staying in there the longest. There's normal body temperatures, about 97.8 to about 100.8. This is where we start to run into problems, right? Normal body temperature, 97.8 degrees Fahrenheit on average. If we get above that, we start to run into problems. Your cells they just don't work when the temperature is so high. This is why fevers can be dangerous. Your body's metabolism cannot do anything when there's too much temperature, which is why, like, you know, when someone has like a really intense fever, they'll try to like keep their tissue temperature down. But the reason your body is even doing that is, you know, your fever is part of your immune system. Your immune system knows that viruses can't live at a very high temperature either. So your body is like, all right, well, we are infected, raise the temperature. And so it turns the thermostat up in hopes of killing that virus. But the problem is it kind of kills you as well. So get it together, immune system. Here's all the things that cause those fevers. We'll go ahead and move past that. Excessive heat can cause cramping, which is obviously very dangerous. It can also cause like fluid loss, which further, you know, makes the cramping worse. And then eventually it can lead to heat stroke, which is really, 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 really dangerous. Excessive cold can be things like hypothermia or even frostbite, which can basically like damage certain tissues and cause them to die. Both those things really, really dangerous. And so, you know, we need to have like a healthy metabolism to kind of keep all that from happening. So I will say, if you guys are reading tonight's chapter, which, you know, or today's chapter, which I hope you do, chapter 20, metabolism in your memblars, you'll notice the second half of this PowerPoint really kind of dove into like metabolism and things like that. You guys really don't have to, you know, if you get to the end of like the ATP production part and the end of the nutrition part, that's actually where you can stop reading in this chapter, just as a pro tip. But if you're fascinated by it, keep reading. And that's it today, guys. You know, I know a lot of this was kind of review, but hopefully it was good to revisit. We haven't talked about it in a couple weeks. But yeah, that's about all I got for you. Do you guys have any questions today? Kenny, Dalen, Cody, Charlie, Andres?
I'm good.
All righty. Man, speaking of...
Yeah, everything good.
What's that?
No, everything good. I think, yeah.
Okay.
We'll just check out the chapter 20, right?
Fair enough. All right, well, I'll kill the recording and see you guys tomorrow.